Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and we are joined once again by the one and only Brien Foerster of HiddenIncaTours.com, and I'm really glad to be joined by you here in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Always good to see you. And first of all, how have your travels been lately? We're going to go into some interesting stuff right away, but I wanted to hear about your recent travels because you just got back from Egypt, like a month or so ago, and during the shutdown, what happened?
Well, basically, we had a tour in Egypt in March, and 2 days before it ended is when they started to close the Cairo International Airport. So everybody, all tourists who were staying in Egypt had to leave as fast as possible. And I got out, I took the last plane, international flight, I think. I had to go to Abu Dhabi, and then from there I flew to JFK. And so while I was in the air, the Cairo airport, all of it shut down, and it's only slowly starting to open now to domestic flights.
Well, and of course you live in Peru and you haven't been able to get to Peru for quite a few months now. It's just insanity. Everyone in the world is dealing with insanity, but when part of your work is traveling all the time, it's absolutely insane. What a nightmare. But I wanted to ask you, as you were just in Egypt, you have been able to get access over the last several years to some amazing sites that not a lot of people have seen. And recently you just went below Saqqara, and you've been in the Osiris shaft. And those of you that have watched our Ancient Civilizations videos know that we've been talking for a long time. There's more to the story than meets the eye, and even within the lost ancient civilization community, there's a lot more to the story than a lot of people talk about. And I wanted to go into something that you mentioned to me a couple days ago while we were talking about these underground tunnels, this tunnel system that we've heard a lot of people allude to before. The Pyramid Code film years ago alluded to it, but you've had the chance to really go deep into some of these, and at least you know of a lot more of them under the ground, connecting the Giza Plateau with a bunch of other places. What do you think the significance of these places are?
Well, the most interesting thing is that, of course, we have Dynastic Egypt, which is when the pharaohs were living, starting about 5,000 years ago, and ending during the time, more or less, of Cleopatra, during the Greco-Roman period. And there are constructions that obviously predate those constructions. And so those are the ones we call pre-dynastic. Most of that is located underground, like built on purpose underground. So tunnels and shafts that connect with each other. I've been 4 levels under the Giza Plateau. I was taken there by a good friend of mine about 4 years ago. He was able to get permission to do that, and so I physically have been under the Giza Plateau.
And a lot of people say that there's a good chance that these tunnels predate ancient Egypt by possibly as much as 10,000 years, possibly even more. I mean, what do you think is the story behind some of these tunnels? Because obviously not a lot of tourists can actually see this stuff for themselves. No,
almost nobody's allowed. I mean, officials in Egypt have been able to, of course, and Egyptologists have been able to. But yeah, by pre-dynastic, I'm talking about actually pre-cataclysmic. So we're talking about prior to 13,000 years ago. How far back before that, I don't know. I just know, as you know, that there were a series of cataclysms that happened between around 12,900 and 11,800 years ago, so over the course of 1,000 years, that disrupted life on the planet and wiped out ancient advanced civilizations that we have some evidence, in stone especially, that we know did exist. In some ways more advanced technologically than we are today.
And I mean, I think there's a lot of significance to this because we see this all over the world. We've both been to Derenkuyu in Turkey. There's massive underground cities all over the world, most of which probably still have not been uncovered and people still don't know about. But in places like Egypt, having such a huge connection to the pyramids and then Saqqara, and this idea that people could go underground in Saqqara and find their way all the way over to like the Osiris shaft or under the Giza Plateau. I mean, this to a lot of people is mind-boggling. The very idea of it, because it's not in any textbooks, nobody talks about it. But you've seen this for yourself. I mean, what do you think the purpose is of people not knowing about this? What is hidden under that underground there that people don't want others to know about?
Well, the great thing about Egypt is that they're actually gradually opening up places that have been prohibited in the past. So the Osiris Shaft was only the domain of, again, Egyptologists and other academics up until I think about 2.5 years ago. And then you could rent it for 2 hours. You pay a fee of around $2,500, and you're able to have access to the Osiris Shaft for 2 hours. It's 3 levels. The first level you go down about 60 feet, and you're in quite a big chamber. Then you go forward, you go down another ladder that takes you down another 100 feet into a pretty complex chamber that has 2 large stone boxes. I will not call them sarcophagi, but they're big boxes made of very hard granitic stone. And then there's another level. Level 3, you go down about 60 feet, and then that takes you to a pool of water. And there's another giant box in there. How they got it down there, I don't know. But I've also heard that there are side tunnels that go and connect with other locations, such as quite possibly underneath the Sphinx itself. So gradually Egypt is opening up some of these sites for, quote unquote tourists to visit, including underneath the step pyramid at Saqqara, which we all know is the oldest dynastic pyramid. It was made as a step pyramid because the dynastic people were trying to copy the Great Pyramid, which predates, that's a pre-dynastic construction. And so there are stories that there are tunnels that connect underneath the Sphinx with the Osiris Shaft and other locations under the Giza Plateau area. And what you're able to do, that was only opened about 4 months ago, I think, is the step pyramid. You're allowed to go down underneath it, and you walk for actually several hundred feet, and then you look down and you can see, I think approximately 100 feet down, there's a giant stone box made of multiple pieces of granitic stone. So that's the latest opening to the public.
And I mean, there's been ground penetrating radar going back to the 1990s showing that there is something underneath the Sphinx. What it is, you can't put a finger on, but with all these tunnels and there all these shafts that just randomly drop out from the Giza Plateau deep into the ground, I mean, the fact that this isn't on people's radar more amazes me. And it's interesting the fact that, again, we see these all over the world, and what would draw people to build such elaborate complexes underground? I mean, Derenkuyu, at the very least, it's dozens of stories down. I mean, the fact is it connects to other tunnels that go from the Black Sea into Syria and Iraq. I mean, it's unthinkable that anyone could build this kind of stuff. What kind of technology would it take to build something so complex?
Well, what they say about Derenkuyu is that they say it's 20 stories down. They allow you down 10 stories, but who's to say it's only 20 stories? Maybe it's much more than that. And as you said, Derenkuyu is connected to at least one other underground complex, pretty close, within miles of it. Obviously, it had to have been done using very advanced technology, because the standard story is that it was people with hand tools that did all of the digging into this bedrock in order to create a safe space to escape from somebody coming in to try to take over. I mean, I'm sure that Derenkuyu was used for that purpose, but it wasn't constructed by those people that they talk about approximately 2,000 years ago. It must be much, much older and had to have been done with very advanced engineering and technology.
See, this is something that drives me crazy about the official stories behind a lot of these places, is that if there's an army ensuing and they were coming after you, would you spend 300 years building an underground, tunnel system, if not longer? I mean, the amount of effort that went into this, it would take hundreds of years to build from the Black Sea to Iraq. I mean, it's a huge country. I've driven from top to bottom. It takes a long time to drive. Building tunnels that connect all these different underground underground cities, all these layers down, all the way to Iraq is absurd. I mean, obviously, and most people will agree with that, whether they agree with the official narrative or not. So then the question is, then you have these tunnels in Egypt, and there's a lot of evidence that, you know, there's water that was able to be utilized for some kind of vibrational frequency purpose. Do you buy into the idea of this, the pyramids being some kind of like a power plant kind of complex or a machine of some sorts built on top of all these tunnel systems?
Well, I think they were vibratory structures. I don't know if they were necessarily producing electricity, but my theory is that it was almost like a Wi-Fi energetic system, that the pyramids themselves were the collectors and focusers of the energy itself, created in the tunnel systems underneath, and then that energy was transmitted to the obelisks, because the obelisks are also pre-dynastic. So you have the transmitter, which is the pyramid, and then you have the receiver, which are the obelisks. And the obelisks are located in very specific locations on purpose. So like at Karnak, it's like there was an array of about 8 of them, all in line. They were later adopted by the dynastic people, who then carved hieroglyphics into them. So yeah, that's it. The obelisks were recycled by the dynastic people as monuments to different pharaohs, but it's impossible that the dynastic people constructed the obelisks themselves, because each one is a single piece of very hard granite material, and that would have to have come most likely from the Aswan quarry in the southern part of Egypt. And
sorry to interrupt, but at the Aswan quarry you have this massive obelisk that you've been able to get down to personally with it, and it still reverberates vibrations. I mean, to this day, it's broken, as you've mentioned in your videos before, but it still is vibrational to some degree, is it not?
Well, the important thing is the unfinished obelisk would have weighed 1,200 tons if it had ever been finished. It was about 2/3 finished, and then was mysteriously abandoned, it seems, by whoever was trying to cut it out of the bedrock. The standard story is that Queen Hatshepsut was the one who commissioned it, but something of that scale, the size of the boat that you would require in order to move it, you know, is of question. Where would they get the boat building materials from? Because most of the trees in modern day Egypt, at least, are date palms, so it's a very soft material. Some people speculate that they had to go all the way to the cedars of Lebanon, but that's about 1,000 miles away. So, you know, taking ships there to get the wood to come back to build a giant barge of some kind. Also, how would you get that thing out of the ground if you had ever finished it anyway? Because you have to lift it out of the location where it is, physically pull it up, and then move it down to the Nile. And the area is not flat; it's very hilly. So, the standard story of that obelisk is completely ridiculous. It's clearly a pre-dynastic construction whose workmanship was never completed.
Well, one has to ask, is that obelisk not larger than the stone of the pregnant woman? I mean, wouldn't that be one of the biggest stones in the world that was cut, if it was cut loose from the bedrock and moved? Wouldn't that make it the biggest stone in the world?
No, so far, like 1,200 tons is comparable to the stone of the pregnant woman at Baalbek. And actually, it's not really called the stone of the pregnant woman. It's called the foundation stone. But the mistranslation from French into English wound up making it being called the stone of the pregnant woman. But very recently, it's still attached to the bedrock, by the way. And very recently, they discovered one next to it, which they've excavated partially, and its estimated weight is 1,600 tons.
It's amazing. Well, I do want to bring up, since we were talking about the tunnels, the 1996, I believe it was NBC special, where Dr. Zahi Hawass was down in the Osiris shaft with an NBC News reporter, who then pointed to an archway at the bottom of the shaft and said, "What's in there?" To which Zahi Hawass says, "Oh, nothing. It was nothing." And a lot of people have theorized, well, perhaps this was a tunnel that went deeper into the ground or something. You've been in the shaft. Have you seen that kind of archway, that hallway kind of area on one of the sides of the Osiris shaft?
Yeah, when you would go down to the bottom of the third level and you look off to the right to some degree, you can see that something has been bricked up down there. So likely that was a tunnel or part of the tunnel system under the Giza Plateau that, I don't know if the Dynastic people wound up closing it off or whether it was done in more modern times. I don't really know, but there is a vast underground series of complexes under the Giza Plateau area that slowly, bit by bit, is being opened up to the general public. How vast the system is, only a few people would actually know that. Not many.
It's absolutely amazing. Well, finally, I do want to mention, or I wanted to ask you about having been to Egypt many times, and you've seen a lot of amazing places around the world. What would you consider to be the most fantastic or the most impressive site in Egypt that you've been to, as far as a significance to lost ancient civilizations?
I would say the complex of two tunnels underneath Saqqara called the serapeum. That's two tunnels that contain 25 giant stone boxes, some of which are estimated to weigh 100 tons apiece. And nobody knows who did the work. Nobody knows how they were able to maneuver the boxes in the tunnels themselves. The stone probably, again, came from Aswan, so how is it transported from the Aswan quarry to the serapeum complex? And there are two giant boxes in there that were never completed. So they seem to have been roughed out outside and then brought in, and then the fine-tuning finishing was done. But the other problem is that there's no soot on the ceiling. Nobody's cleaned the ceilings. So how was the lighting in that system during the construction of that whole complex is one of the great mysteries. Obviously, it was artificial light of some kind. It wasn't gold mirrors, as some people say. Obviously, with advanced technology, you have advanced lighting systems along with them. So that probably, I would say, is one of my favorite places. The other one is the Osirion, which is at Abydos. And I had the great fortune of being able to go, you're not allowed to go there now because they're cleaning it up, getting it ready for next year to open to the general public. But one of the guards took me down there, and I was able to have it to myself for half an hour. And it's very vast, and I'm actually working on a video about that people will be able to see on my YouTube channel probably within a month. I'm still processing my material from Egypt now. Some of my YouTube videos from the March 2020 tour are up, but I still have the most fascinating ones are coming up within the next month or two.
Well, I'm very excited to see those. I appreciate you joining us, and good to see you here in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. And where can people find more of your information and support the work that you do? I know you have a ridiculous amount of books that you've written. Well,
I've got 37 books. I've got about 1,500 videos on YouTube, and everything is at www.hiddenincatours.com. 95% of the material is free. The books, of course, are for sale. And then I'm also on Vimeo in terms of if you want to purchase my videos. But as I said, I have something like 1,500 videos on YouTube. I don't know how many more I'm going to bother making at this point. I've covered all of these subjects, I think, quite extensively. So I'm hoping to get back to Egypt in March of 2021, but that'll depend upon this whole bizarro hysteria nightmare we're going through of cleaning itself up. But I hope to continue to do some of this stuff. But if I don't, then I don't really care. If I'm done, I've done my job, and I look forward to you and people like you to carry on some of the foundational work that I and Graham Hancock and Robert Boval and Robert Schock and others have done.
Well, I appreciate that. 2020, I feel like if Black Mirror and The Twilight Zone had a baby, it would be 2020 so far. It's been very strange for all of us, and I'm looking forward to doing some adventuring shortly. So make sure to check out the Ancient Civilizations playlist on World Alternative Media and find me on the other platforms, Flote and BitChute as well. Anyway, I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
My pleasure as always, Josh. Thank you. And thank you.
Like what you see here, don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon, Subscribe Star. We really can't do it without you. We've been so insanely shadow banned, about 90% at this point, and 95% demonetized. As Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube, comes in and says that she is shutting down quote-unquote controversial content and cutting out the views on this controversial content by 70%. She's been bragging about it. We need your help more than ever in this battle for truth in information. You guys are what keeps us alive, so we really appreciate just even $1 a month makes a huge difference. If everyone could give just $1 a month, we wouldn't even have to worry about competing against the mainstream propaganda networks. You can also donate to our Bitcoin address on the screen for you to scan if you please, as well as in the comments and description. Liking and sharing makes a big difference as well, and finding us on alternative social media platforms like flote.app, that's flote.app, makes a huge difference. We're at Josh Sigurdson as well as at Wham. Flote is replacing Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Tumblr, Reddit, and Patreon all in one with encrypted private messaging, and of course monetization on videos for creators, live streams with super chats in crypto, and most of all, no algorithm, because at the end of the day, it's all about reach, guys. This is all about actually reaching people with the message and waking up the public. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, Minds, BitChute, all sorts of different platforms. Try to follow us on as many things as possible, because very soon this channel will very likely just be completely deleted from YouTube, and you'll never see us again, and you'll be stuck with only the mainstream networks. Also, come on out and see us at Anarcho Vegas 2020 in Las Vegas, Nevada in July, where such speakers such as G. Edward Griffin and many others will be speaking. You could use promo code WHAM on your VIP tickets and save 10%, as well as buy extremely cheap tickets for just $20.20. You won't find a cheaper conference than this with such amazing names. Check anarchovegas.com for more information on that. We hope to see you out there. And anyway, I really appreciate all of you guys joining us. You make it possible for us to survive in this volatile, propagandized climate. Until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.
Thank you.